Hey Gundam Maniacs, welcome to another episode of Gundam Explained. In this episode, we're going to look at my top 5 tips that I think about when I'm doing posing of either my Gunpla or my action figures. Yeah, and hopefully these tips can help. I can kind of show off what I do in general. Alright, and to start off, we are going to have a look at this ground Gundam. Now this is a Robot Spirits. We'll also be looking at some Gunpla as well. Something to keep in mind when it comes to posing Gunpla, or Robot Spirits, these action figures, is they're robots, right? So that's a big thing here. You've got something that would be more like a human and how it would pose. For instance, right here, we have got Wolverine. This is from X-Men 97. And, yeah, he's not standing. All right, there we go. And, you know, what helps when it comes to posing action figures, especially if you're used to more humanoid action figures, is trying to replicate what it would look like a human would shape themselves into. That's usually the first key, or the first sign that, you know, something is pleasing to the eye because we're familiar with it. And while those same philosophies can be applied to robots, we're also going to look at how to make it look like a robot. So if you're not using a stand, my number one tip is flat feet. Right now, you would think, oh, this Gundam has flat feet, but not really, and that will actually throw off how pleasing and realistic it could possibly look. Make sure you're working with flat feet. That's going to help you make sure you get them standing and supporting whatever pose you're coming out with, and it kind of helps make it look realistic in the first place. When it comes to looking like a robot, there's one thing, and that's the feet could be pointing forward. If you were to do more of a humanoid style pose, you would not want that. You would want feet to be offset just a bit. There's a what's called hero pose, where you sort of twist the thighs out from each other just a bit. They kind of give it a neat kind of natural but powerful stance. I would also lower the chin down just a bit and have the elbows just bent slightly to give it a more natural look as it's standing there. For some mobile suit designs, you have the shoulders that you have to work with. It's very easy after you get a pose done to not realize that the shoulders are offset a bit. And another thing, just like with the rule with the feet, is look at the shoulders. Make sure whatever angle the shoulders might be in, that they're kind of equal on both sides. Now, it really depends on the action and what's going on, but typically that's going to help get a real pleasing looking pose. Along with that are what you do with your hands. Luckily, a lot of Gunpla and Robot Spirits come with extra hands that you can use for different things. For instance, I wouldn't have a kind of a gripping hand like this without something in it. I wouldn't have it just stand there like that. I would try to see if I have a closed fist. Also, when you have these open and dynamic hands, it's pretty neat what you can do, because you can like use this for supporting, holding another weapon. Which, another tip, check your Robot Spirits or your Gunpla to see if you have shoulder articulation. Because you can actually have them come in so that you can have arms move in, hands closer to each other, and you can use that dynamic hand for that purpose. Because if not holding a weapon, the dynamic hand can also be used to kind of signify motion or moving. Here's an example, just make it look like this guy's flying, but like, you know, where you see his hand is kind of doing something. So that's something else to check. The 2 feet being flat on the ground for your pose. What are the hands doing? What do you do with your hands? Make sure that they're doing what they would be doing in whatever pose that is. And speaking of whatever pose that is, that's another thing when you're deciding what pose you want to do. Sure, you can have them just standing there, but you might want to have it look like it's an action pose. And for that, always make it like it's in mid-motion. So for mid-motion, think of it as a freeze frame within a cool fight scene. It could be this cold district taking a swing at the Sifrit. Their Ifrit is reaching up to block. Now, they are not hitting each other in this pose, but they're in the motion, in the movement of it. Here's another quick example of that mid-motion of, you know, this GM is looking pretty badass, kind of just doing a little walk. And, you know, a lot of things that you can help make the walk realistic is maybe having a relaxed hand as it's swinging. And a lot of times you want to have the arms going in opposite directions of the legs below it. And so by lifting the head up and putting that arm back a little more, this arm forward a little more, I can make it look like it's going from walking to running, looking like it is going into action. And as you're doing something like that, look at how the shoulders are, because maybe that wasn't a good idea. Maybe I should have looked and said, okay, I want to have that movement, but I have to pull the shoulder back, which means I have to then push the hand back. That way the shoulders look a little more even. Think of it as sketching your rough draft and then going back and doing the finer details. Now here's one I love to pose. This is the Robot Spirits Zeta Gundam. It's not the Ver anime, but it has a very anime heroic style to it. So here's the Zeta Gundam put in a heroic pose. A few things I've done, as you can see, where the feet are kind of, pointing out from each other. Not only do I have the head looking down a little bit, but also turned to the side just slightly. And while that hand isn't necessary, it could be a closed fist and it looks good, this dynamic style hand works very well. Looking at this, there is more of a sleek sort of edge to everything, a stylized edge where you could probably go a little further in certain departments. Like I wouldn't bend the elbows in this case because I think it gives off a cool look on its own like this. All right, so what do you do with something like this? Because these are a lot harder to pose. In fact, the Nightingale, maybe I can have an arm up or down, that's about it. This you could be creative. I think if you have a stand, however it works on something like this, I haven't attempted it, you could have some poses where it looks like it's more in flight, and I think that's best for this type of suit, especially if you see it in the anime and it's mainly used for, those atmospheric battles. What I would do in this case is, let's look at its gimmicks. For instance, this chonker here, its gimmicks are the forearms with the beam sabers. I would just maximize that like I have here. You do something basic like looking forward, everything outstretched like Grievous, even though, this came before Grievous. Or something like this, where he's playing peekaboo over his collarbone. But a tip to use here is, if you're having trouble figuring out a good dynamic pose for something, see how far up you can get the arms to the shoulder, and then bend in one of the elbows as much as you can. It's super limited, but at least by turning the head, I can make it look like he's trying to square off with someone. This one's another good example of check the parts on it as it is a robot, because you have the wing binders, make sure they're even, the shoulders, even the way the feet work on this, it's very easy to make them uneven. Flight stands are very helpful, because in that case, you can kind of move the feet around however you want. Do a lot of those mid-motion poses that don't require the feet touching the ground. And then here we go with the flight stands. What really helps there is getting super dynamic without having to worry about the action figure or the Gunpla falling. Another tip here is, if you're going to do a shot with, using any sort of gun or rifle, if you have the eye line looking towards the direction of the gun, it also helps with it looking realistic because it's taking that humanoid form and, making it familiar and pleasing to look at. All right, and there you have it, some cool tips to hopefully give you ideas when posing, just to have your shelf look a little more dynamic, give some life to your action figures, but not feel like it's something you can't do, because really it is easy. Just give it a shot. Remember, first pass is a draft. Go back, do the little details, snap it with your phone. You know what? Share them at the Discord for Gundam Explained, link below in the description. There's already tons of awesome photos people have shared there. I can also give you ideas. Anyway, thanks for watching. Shout out to the supporters that make this possible. Check the links in the description for fun things like that. And until next time, be cool.